Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast, a special Inside Lowell podcast, a debate between the two sides battling over question number 5 on your ballot Tuesday, or on your mail-in or early ballot if you have already voted. I'm going to bring in the folks for that debate in just a quick moment. First, I want to welcome you to the WellPoint Studios. I'm your host, Teddy Panos. WellPoint is the only health plan offering health benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And we thank our friends at WellPoint for helping to make this podcast possible and all of our Inside Lowell podcasts possible, along with the rest of our podcast sponsors. You'll see their logos scrolling on your screen during the course of this discussion. But I want to say a thank you to Washington Savings Bank. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. Thank you as well to TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space at TMI. Boston North Company, business solutions for restaurant and retail. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell since 1925. Francis E. Prevention Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell has counted on for nearly 40 plus years now, and by the Massachusetts Pirates, who are bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Thank you to them, and thank you to my special guests who are joining us here in the WellPoint Studios for today's discussion. I'm going to bring them in to you in a quick second. Ballot question number 5 is the debate that we're having today. Just to kind of quickly read how it's portrayed on your ballot. A yes vote on question 5 would gradually increase the minimum hourly wage for tipped workers until it reaches the state requirement of $15 an hour by 2029 and distribute pooled tips evenly among employees. A no vote would mean no change to how things currently are, and tip workers would still make their minimum wage of $6.75 an hour as long as their total earnings with tips reach $15 an hour. We're going to get a little bit into that, but first let me introduce the advocates on each side of this. Representing the no side on 5 is Kathi Turner from Turner Seafood Restaurant and Market. She's got locations in Melrose, in Gloucester, and in Salem. Thank you for joining us today, Kathi.
Thank you, Teddy, for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. And representing the no side, the yes side, I apologize, Mitch Gaynes, a bartender and server for over 15 years and now an advocate for yes on 5. Welcome to you as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys having me on.
And our pleasure. We actually discovered that the two of you have Gloucester as a common location at some point, right?
Yes.
All right. The way this discussion will work is, as most of our Inside Lowell debates work, we're going to give each side an opportunity to make an opening statement, 2 minutes or less. Then we will present some questions in rotating order, allow time for a response from each side, and maybe further discussion if the question or the topic so warrants it. And then we will have a 2-minute closing argument from each of you as well. So with that, let us get right to the discussion, and we flip the coin to determine the order. So Kathi, you get to go first, your opening statement.
I believe he goes first because he wanted to close.
That's right. You get to close. I apologize. It's a good thing that the guests know more than the debate moderator.
No,
right,
no worries. You got a lot of other things going on.
You get to lead it off.
Sure thing. Well, thanks again for having me, and thanks for everybody listening out there at home, watching, wherever you're picking this up, streaming, whatever it is these days. Thank you to everybody who gives a dang enough about getting research about the issues that you're voting on. I think not enough of us take the time to make sure that we're well educated and well informed, and I'm honored for everybody out there who's taking the time to listen to me and Ms. Turner have a discussion on such an important issue. If you don't know who I am, no worries. Obviously, I'm not exactly famous. My name is Mitch Gaynes. I'm a bartender and server of over 15 years. I've got a bunch of different side gigs and other jobs along the way, including mostly in community organizing and support. And now what we're here for, which is why am I for question 5? So what question 5 does is slowly raise the server minimum wage, something that we've already done before several times already in my career. In my first ever serving role, I made $2.63 an hour. I was back in Gloucester at a Friendly's. That server minimum wage at the time, that's gone up about $4.12 in the 15 years I've been in the industry to today's server minimum wage, which is $6.75. Both then and now, that wage is barely enough to cover the taxes that you're going to owe on the tips that you've claimed. And so your paychecks are often $0, maybe if you're lucky, $3 or $4. And so we need a raise. It's that plain and simple. The wage an employee receives from their employer should be enough that they take home money in their paycheck. We're not asking for some exorbitant amount, but simply a full minimum wage. Currently, the server minimum wage in Massachusetts, like I said, is $6.75. That is less than the full minimum wage anywhere in the states, and that includes places like Alabama or Mississippi that only pay $7.25 no matter what job you have. Tips are great, and they're not going anywhere. But tips should be a gratuity for good service, not a subsidy of the restaurant owner's payroll or an unspoken expectation of a fee that's predetermined regardless of the quality of your interaction. We'll hear a great deal about what this will all cost business owners and how much other costs have increased, but I'm still looking for an answer as to why workers who receive no equity in these establishments the majority of the time are the ones expected to take a pay cut, and why the customer, you, is expected to make up that difference. I look forward to discussing the details of an issue that I've been passionate about for as long as I've been of voting age, and to finally have this on the ballot, have the opportunity for the Commonwealth to lead the way on an issue that should be addressed nationally, as we so often do.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Kathi.
So, Teddy, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity today to clear up some of the opponent's misinformation about ballot question 5. Unlike my opponent, who is a paid employee of One Fair Wage, I volunteer for the Massachusetts Restaurant Association Board, and I'm also volunteering today to speak on behalf of our industry's teams, businesses, customers, and communities. Speaking out against No on 5 are thousands of people across the state from all walks of life and all political parties. Thousands of servers, bartenders, and back-of-the-house employees, numerous elected officials, legislators, and mayors from both sides of the aisle, including Governor Healy and Kim Driscoll, are No on 5. Thousands of concerned citizens, independent restaurant owners, chambers of commerce, multiple newspapers. Not even the Hospitality Union of Massachusetts endorses this ballot question. Why are all these people and groups saying No on 5? Because it is a bad bill, which hurts the very people they claim to help and has nothing to do with increasing minimum wages, and hides the fact that servers and bartenders are already guaranteed minimum wage and make tips on top. If this passes, servers and bartenders' wages will go down, and that is if they don't lose their jobs. If this passes, it'll exacerbate the very issues that they claim it helps. It'll hurt the independent restaurants, which constitute 90% of our restaurants in Massachusetts. These mom-and-pop businesses will be forced to change their business models to counter service, add service fees, increase prices, or worse, just close because they can't stay in business. This is a lose-lose-lose for teams, businesses, customers, and communities. And it takes Massachusetts citizens' freedom of choice to make decisions about how we work and live away from us.
Okay, thank you both. First question, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Kathi. 7 states, Alaska, California, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, and Oregon, and Washington, have similar laws guaranteeing tipped employees the same minimum wage as all other workers in those states. And they seem to have a restaurant industry that is surviving there. Why would it harm the Massachusetts restaurant
First
industry?
of all, those 7 states, including California, which changed it in 1984, have never had a tip credit. So what this does is it forces a 42% wage increase for the highest population of our staffs in the first year. That is why this is such a drastic change to an industry, because no restaurant which works on 3 to 5% margins can afford a 42% wage increase in 1 year for 70% of their staff. Also, in those states that do have this, California has the lowest tip percentage in the entire country. That has been documented by Toast for the last 4 years. And California, every single time their minimum wage goes up, their tip percentages go down. So that is fine. If all these other states choose to do that, if they want tipping to not be a part of their culture, that's their choice. And the people in Massachusetts can make that choice for themselves. They do it with their business dollars and with their feet, not by having it forced upon them by a radical leftist group from California telling us how we should live and work.
Okay, Mitch, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
Sure. I guess a few quick things. I'm not a radical leftist. I'm not from California. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm from the same hometown Kathi is, Gloucester, Massachusetts. Been here 34 years of my life. Secondarily, as you mentioned, there's 7 states that already do this. Also, one of our territories, Guam, already has this. Hawaii has a hybrid model where they pay, it's a tip credit that gets you over minimum wage, not just up to minimum wage, and they pay you a larger amount. So there's even more examples than you mentioned. They love to bring up California as the peak example, and I'm happy to, you seem very frustrated already. I'm happy to concede some of these points to you. I'm not going to argue with you. Like, yes, California is the worst tipping state in the country. How much does California tip, according to Toast, that same survey?
17.1%.
17.3%. But yeah, what's Massachusetts tip on average? 19.3%. It's a 2% difference. So what you're talking about is a 2% reduction in tips in exchange for a $10 an hour raise, which means that tipping point is you doing $412 an hour as a server. Now, if you're a full-time server at home, you don't have the time to be doing this math. Let me do it for you. That's nearly $16,000 a week for a full-time server. I don't know any servers who ring in $16,000 every single week. Maybe you guys do at home, but that's $68,000 per month. Those are the only people who are going to lose money under this compared to the California model. So if you're using that as your model, sure, tipping's not going away. Thank you for bringing that up. California still tips. They tip 17%. Minnesota tips on average the exact same as Massachusetts, 20% or so. If you look at Montana, Montana's a better tipping state than Massachusetts is currently. So none of these places did tips go away. The place where it's the worst tipping state, as you guys like to point out, is 2% worse than we tip here. And for what it's worth, the best tipping state tips 23%. It's 4% more than we tip here. So like the range that we all consider when we go out to eat is what were we all told when we grew up? 15 to 25%, right? Like base, you got to leave at least 15%. You leave 25%, maybe more for great service. Nowhere in the country is that not true. It does not matter if they have one fair wage or not.
So to respond to that, because it's a 42% increase in the first years, restaurants cannot absorb that into their things. So the basic model that most places will have to do is put a service charge on. And having done the numbers, if we put a 5% service charge on and our customers take that into consideration and tip 15%, even though the wage will go from $6.75 to $9.60, the amount our servers will make by only getting 15% is $4 less an hour than they currently make under our current system. If we go all the way to the end of this, when it is $15 an hour, we'd have to have a 15% service fee. Our servers right now at our businesses make $35 an hour. With a 15% service fee and people then only tip 5% on top, they'll be making $21 an hour. So there's no way to absorb these astronomical wage increases into the current business models of independent restaurants in Massachusetts. Now listen, we love our teams. Our teams are the most important people in our building. If we don't take care of our teams, they don't take care of our customers. If this was such a great model and was so good for our teams, we would be doing it anyway. Danny Myers tried this in New York, and he found out it didn't work. The servers didn't want it, and the customers didn't want it. We know how to take care of our teams and our people. We don't need this group from California or wherever they want to be and have their agenda pushed on the people that already know how to run their businesses and take care of their communities.
Okay. Mitch, I see that you want to respond, and I'm going to get this question out because I think it was kind of addressed there. So look, the question seeks to pay the servers minimum wage, which is $15 an hour. They currently make $6.75. However, the law does say that if the server does not make a minimum of $15 per hour, then the employer, the restaurant owner or the service station place owner, needs to make up that difference. So if they're guaranteed by Massachusetts state law already to make $15 an hour, why do we need this law put in place?
Sure. So a couple things there. I just want to go back quickly to Kathy's example. So you're assuming that tips are going lower than 2% lower than the current worst tipping state. And I want to note that that $4.13 an hour that I mentioned, that was predicated on 15% tips. As you can see here, it's a 1 cent difference. So you, again, $68,000 in sales is what you need to get that difference.
You don't run a restaurant.
Right, I work in them.
Yeah.
That's the difference. As far as addressing the $15 guaranteed minimum wage, that's the difference. It's a guarantee. It's not a full 15. So yeah, if I make $6.75 and nobody comes into the restaurant on Monday night, you pay me the $8.25 difference for those 4 or 5 hours I was there. But if I work that Monday night and nobody comes in, and then I work that Saturday night and I make a boatload of money, you don't actually have to pay me the $8.25 difference. Now, previous to a couple of years ago, a lot of times, now still in a couple of different restaurants, if they run on an older payroll model, you as the employee then also have to flag that and bring that to the employer's attention to be able to get that pay. Now, a lot of that's automated by technology nowadays. I'm happy to grant that. But imagine up until recently, and still in some restaurants, being a 18, 19, 20-year-old kid starting their career and trying to approach your boss saying, hey, I did a really bad job on the floor this week. I didn't make enough in tips. Will you pay me some more money, please, sir, please? To the people who supposedly care so much about their employees. But then I turn around and see those people who are making that ask get fired after 2 or 3 times making that ask. So I'm never going to make that ask again. And this is rampant in the industry. So what's the difference? The difference is, yeah, you're guaranteed to make $15 an hour if you don't get there versus you're guaranteed to make $15 an hour no matter what you make in tips. And that's a huge difference.
Okay. I want to move on because I think we're starting to get into that area as well. So we're going to start with you this time, Mitch. One of the arguments I've heard in favor is that it will allow the restaurant owner to use those tips that are put in to pool them with other employees. So back of the house employees, front of the house employees, whoever would then be able to have part of that in tips. Tell me how that doesn't sound a little bit like redistributing the wealth.
Sure thing.
So, quote unquote, it's kind of classic Marxist theory, is it not? Taking from somebody and giving to somebody else.
I wouldn't go as far as to call it Marxist, but hey, call it what you want. I guess this is what I would say on tip pooling. Certainly the part of the bill I was most skeptical of, right? A few things to clarify on tip pooling. This doesn't mandate tip pooling at all. It simply makes it optional. So again, to the people of Kathi Turner who care so much about their employees, you don't have to implement it. Tip pooling is not mandated. You don't have to do this. But currently, tip pooling is already a thing in the front of the house. So as of right now, you can pool amongst non-minimum wage employees, people who are making a sub-minimum wage, right? So there are restaurants, I've worked in one before over in Cambridge, where the bartenders, the servers, we all pool, and then we tip out, the food runners and the bussers as a result of that money, right? And that saved my life, if I'm being honest. That was the first place I ever bartended, and thank God I had some servers on shift who were former bartenders who taught me really well how to be a bartender because their money was on the line, not because they were just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, right? So in some places, that does work out. Now, as far as including the back of the house, well, doesn't it make sense if everybody's making above minimum wage that maybe you tip out the person who also had something to do with that incredible meal you just served? Sure. So in some places they tip out 1 or 2% to the back of the house. I was just recently in Minnesota. My wife is from there. Again, another state that did have a tip credit previously and eliminated this in 1988 and implemented this. We have 30 years of data on this. It has not killed their restaurant industry. People still tip there. Servers make great money, right? And I asked pretty much every server I talked to. I talked to 2 who had ever worked in a tip-pooled restaurant. One was extremely high fine dining. They were paid $33 a flat wage, and it was discouraged to have diners tip whatsoever. Another, they were paid $26 as a flat wage, and restaurant diners could tip on top of that, and then they pooled the tips, and it was 70% to the front of the house, and then the other 30 got split between the back house and support staff. So in every instance, servers are still making more money. If they are pulling it all, they're making the majority of the tips. And this idea that you're somehow pulling up people who are not pulling their weight, no, those people get flagged even quicker, because if you're not good at your job, and we as a team can't even help you become good at your job, then you're not going to have a job very long, because you're messing up everybody's money, not just your own.
Okay, Kathi, and giving you an opportunity to respond to that, let me give you the other side of that. So part of the tip is the enjoyment of a great dining experience, right? The ambiance, the atmosphere, and the food, the quality of the food, et cetera, the cleanliness, et cetera. So why is it a bad thing to allow some of those back of the house workers that don't share get a part of that tip for improving the overall experience? Why is it a bad thing for them to get a cut of gratuity?
Actually, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Right now, restaurant owners can prove how they want to run their business models. In fact, at our restaurants, we have a 1% kitchen appreciation fee on our bills because we figured that was the best thing for our teams. And our servers are happy for the back of the house to get that because they're a vital part of it. What this does is the tip credit allows us, because we're paying servers $6.75 as a base wage, allows us to take the rest of that money and distribute it to the back of the house. Our margins are
the wealth.
Our margins are because the servers are the highest paid. Excuse me, Mitch. I am speaking right now. I am speaking.
That's what you said.
We take the $6.75. It allows us to have more money to pay our back of the house higher wages. can I just finish speaking, please?
I just wanted you to be accurate. That's all.
$6.75 is the amount of the tip credit that we pay our servers. They're guaranteed $15 an hour. Our servers are the highest paid people in the building, higher than owners, chefs, back of the house, anyone else. But because we pay them $6.75, it gives us more money in our pool to pay our back of the house team higher. If we are taking that money out of the flat amount of money that we get from a customer, it's not going to allow us to pay them more. So every restaurant can choose the business model that works for them. Some of them are even choosing this model. If it works for them, they'll choose to do that. We don't need someone imposing it upon us. Let us run our businesses. Let our teams make their own choices on how they want to live and work.
Okay, Mitch.
Well, I guess in quick response, this doesn't impose anything on you. Like we talked about, this isn't mandatory. This is optional. And so if you want to keep it as a kitchen appreciation fee, great. Currently, the reason you have to have that as a kitchen appreciation fee is because you're not allowed to take any of the tips and tip them out. So you're using the tip credit of $8.25 to redistribute that money as wages to the back of the house and adding on a service fee. We're trying to do away with the necessity for that and just allowing your front of the house to tip out the back of the house if you so choose. You can keep the model you want if you want to. I should also point out, this isn't some radical idea that is only in one fair wage states or radical leftist groups. This is legal in every single state except Massachusetts and New York. It does not matter if they pay one fair wage or not. So if it's already legal everywhere else and it's not the norm anywhere, and again, it hasn't killed the industry anywhere, it hasn't taken over the industry anywhere, I challenge you to prove to a single state where the majority of restaurants are tip pooled and the majority of those pooled tips are going to the back of house and not front of house employees. It does not exist. That state does not exist. And I want to challenge one claim you made there, which is that your servers make more than your owners?
Yes.
Really? So you make less than $70,000 a year?
I work 60 to 80 hours a week.
Right, and you make
I don't
less
own
than
restaurants. Restaurants own me.
Okay, so do you make less or more than $70,000 a year?
I'm not going to tell you how much I make.
Well, you just claimed that all of your servers make more money than you, and the highest paid servers in the entire state make less
don't
than
work 60 to 80 hours a week either.
Right, and that.
Okay, so this is not about me. This is about how I can take care of my teams. This is about how we choose to run our business. We don't need you to. We are not.
This is also about restaurant workers, and so if you're going to make the claim that restaurant workers make more than you do as an owner, then you have to establish how much you make as an owner.
If you're
Let's
not
allow each other to finish our answers, and then we'll give you plenty of time to go back and.
Restaurants in Massachusetts are not broken, and they don't need one fair wage to come in and tell us how we should be running our businesses. We run our businesses great. That is why Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll are saying this is not good for Massachusetts. It's not good for the teams. It's not good for the customers. It's not good for our communities. It's just not a bill that we need. We are fine. This state will evolve as it needs to evolve. If it chooses to go to these other models, it will do it. They tried to get this passed through the legislature for the last 10 years. And the Massachusetts legislature said, no, we do not believe this is good for Massachusetts. So they had to spend $700,000 and hire people to collect signatures to get it on the ballot. This is not a grassroots campaign by servers and bartenders in Massachusetts. They love their jobs. They are school teachers and nurses and other people. They pay for cheerleading camp. They're choosing to do this because they love the way it works and they don't want to see it changed.
Okay. Mitch, you pointed to yourself there. You say you're a server and bartender.
Well, she claims this isn't a grassroots campaign by servers and bartenders. I'm a server and bartender for over 15 years. I have lots of friends in the industry who helped collect signatures for this. Over 4,300 people who are servers and bartenders signed to put this on the ballot. I would note, as far as the money that's spent, the Massachusetts Restaurant Association has poured in close to $4 million into this race to try and get the no vote out there. I would imagine $700,000 is less than $4 million, correct? Frankly, I'm not sure I trust the math of somebody who thinks that her servers make less money than she does owning 3 restaurants, but I assure you that $700,000 is less than almost $4 million. That's factual.
I'm sorry, you're paid by one fair wage, aren't you?
I am, as an independent contractor. Yes, I'm a server and a bartender who was already getting out his advocacy to vote yes on 5, was contacted by the campaign so that they could give me money to continue doing what I was already doing. And I'm very happy that a group of people valued my work that much.
At the very least, there does appear to be a split. I don't know what the numbers are, whether it's 50-50, 75-25, but there's certainly a significant number of tipped employees who are not in favor of this. How do you respond to them?
In a number of ways, I guess. A lot of my advocacy work online, as Kathi wants to point out that I'm getting paid for, is the stuff I don't get paid for, actually, is responding to propaganda and knocking down the things that they put out there. One of the things that circulates a lot is that 90% of tipped employees do not want this. The MRA, Kathi herself, has shared this out on the internet, loves to pull this statistic. That's based on a survey that surveyed 351 servers and bartenders. Quick check. You're a guy from Massachusetts, right? You seem to know a lot about Massachusetts. How many towns and cities are there in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? 351. So they surveyed one employee per town or city, and you claim that that is definitive. Now, the question that they asked that was supposedly so definitive here is, which compensation system would you prefer? The current system with a lower base wage and tips that provide the ability to earn more than a minimum wage, or a different system with a higher base wage but a less certain outcome on tipped income for the server?
That's true.
Does that sound... Sorry, with a less certain income on tipped income?
Yes, because the tips could be distributed amongst the entire restaurant and not to them. And it is also true.
It's not less certain, though. That is quite literally the choice of you, the restaurant owner.
Right. It's absolutely less certain because the servers no longer own their tips. It is certainly less certain. And I just do want to address that, yes, you know what, Mitch does do a lot of social media posts about this. And in fact, his social media post last week said, never go to Turner Seafood again.
If you're going to quote me, please quote me accurately.
Interview, I would never recommend anyone patronize that place again. Those are the kind of social media posts that he's putting out.
Could you please quote me accurately?
It's right there.
Says, I was probably never going to go to Turner Seafood again. That does not tell anyone else not to go
But
there.
after the WE interview, I will never recommend anyone patronize their business. Those are the social media posts that he's putting out there.
Do you want to read the quote that I quoted you from that's also shared in that post?
Yes, it says
that we don't have a wage theft issue and that sexual harassment is not an issue in the restaurant industry.
And he forgot the rest of the quote that said there are already political protections in place.
She believes there's enough political protections currently in place for the rampant sexual harassment and wage theft in the restaurant industry. The Department of Labor did a study that showed that 83% of restaurants that they audited were already payroll non-compliant. And it is well known.
That is not factually correct.
That is factually correct. The last time it was studied by the DOL was the Department of Labor under Obama. You can go check the study for yourself if you'd like.
I have the study right here.
All right.
So it's clear that you two are very passionate about your issues, and
I'm passionate about accuracy.
Talking about servers and where they are, and obviously they're affected by this. I want to end this by talking about the customers,
yes,
and how they're going to be affected by this. And first question will go to you, Mitch. So, are there any safeguards in this legislation that would prevent an owner, a restaurant owner, from charging the customers a fee? As we've talked about, the fees that will be charged to help offset the raise in the minimum wage. But then, is there anything in there that says how they can use that money? Does that money have to be distributed amongst restaurant staff? Can it go to management? Can it go to the business's bottom line? In other words, if I'm in this thing, I'm like, all right, well, I'll just charge 8 to 10% extra, whatever that number is. I'll pay off whatever extra this is costing me, and I may even have a few bucks left over at the end that will go into my bottom line or to pay for supplies, etc. Are there any safeguards in that would ban this?
Not currently, and so I'm again happy to admit that. I should point out that the service fee model was most prevalent when this launched in D.C. When they launched the service fees, it was in direct retaliation of this passing. It was the local restaurant association's initiative to attempt to essentially tell customers, we don't want this to pass, we're going to try and get this revoked, and they were successful. Customers hated it. They actually repealed one fair wage. We had to fight to get it back on the ballot there, and it passed with even more support than it did the first time. And locally, D.C. passed a new measure where you have to accurately label directly on the bill that goes to the customer where this money is going. To your point, to the back house, to the business owner, does it count as sales, does it count as a tip, etc. In most instances, that money is going directly to the business owner. When you see that as a customer, you're thinking 20%, that's about what I usually tip. That must be the tip. I don't need to tip more. And naturally, people tip less. When the customers found this out, there was a huge boycott of restaurants that did this. As I mentioned, there was a public policy pushback. And currently, Biden's administration is working to get this passed on a federal level, that same labeling law would be federally instituted. And ideally, we'd pass another one on top of that gets rid of junk fees entirely. Now, I'm glad you pointed out Maura Healey previously, because she's a huge advocate working to get rid of junk fees in general. So she's gone after Ticketmaster. She's going through after some of these larger junk fee systems. And so almost certainly here in Massachusetts, I don't anticipate this being a big worry. But I do want to point out that almost in every instance, these service fees are kept by owners. These are not being distributed to workers. These are not, paying for payroll bumps. These are going towards sales directly in their own ROI reports.
Actually, he has no factual evidence to back that up. And we actually do distribute all of our kitchen appreciation fees to our kitchen team.
That's a 1% fee, yes. On your one restaurant.
And there's already protections in Massachusetts that there has to be labeling about any fee that's on the bill that is not a tax or a direct gratuity. And that's already in place in Massachusetts. But this really has nothing to do with either of those conversations. It has to do with the business models. It has to do with the people in Massachusetts, the customers and the voters understanding what this actually means. And that's what the whole point is. This is a bill that is not needed in Massachusetts because we have healthy bartenders and servers in our industries. We have healthy restaurants. We have communities that love community-based businesses that love their communities and support their communities. This is a bill that is not needed here and will just fundamentally change our state for a reason that we didn't even want to happen. And that's what we want voters to understand. We don't need this. We don't want it. And if these things are so good, they will happen organically. They don't need to be forced upon us.
Let me ask you a question, Kathi, from the customer's perspective. Because tipping is kind of expected now. I'm old enough to remember a time where the gratuity was for a job well done, and it was 10 to 15% was great. Now it's kind of 20+%, especially post-pandemic, is pretty much expected in the industry unless you're getting lousy service. Why should the customer have to pick up that cost? Why should the customer have to deal with an angry server or whatnot for not leaving a high enough tip, a perceived high enough tip, instead of the person who's actually owning the business? Why shouldn't they have to pay to get that server to what's a minimum /
A customer never needs to tip. It is a gratuity, and it is completely at their option. So a customer never needs to tip. And some customers, especially those from Europe, especially now in Salem, a lot of people don't tip that much. And that's totally their choice. And our servers know that that's just part of the dynamics of the business. They know the better service they get, the better tip they get. And they're happy with that system. Customers get to choose what they want to do. And if this law passes, it's going to force the restaurant owners to change their service models, whether or not it's going to counter service, whether or not it's adding service fees, whether or not it's just eliminating the number of servers they have on their floor. There's no way to absorb a 42% wage increase for 70% of your staff in 1 year without fundamental changes when you only work on 5 cents on a dollar. That's just the base truth of all of this. In a 5-year period, it's going to be 122% wage increase. Now, you can't pass that on to customers in higher prices because you're going to price them out of dining with you. We love our customers. We don't want to force their systems to change. They like our restaurants the way they are. Our servers like their jobs the way they are. We are happy the way we are. And this forces a change that is unneeded. And that's why thousands and thousands and thousands of bartenders, owners, restaurants, customers, legislators all across the state are saying no on 5. We don't need it and we don't want it.
So Mitch, a chance to respond to that. Do you allow for the possibility that a lot of business owners are going to have to put a fee on to offset these costs rather than raise their prices significantly? If the customer knows that there's already a fee that's being paid, will it jeopardize the amount that they're going to leave in a tip?
Well, so I guess 2 things there. One, we just heard directly from the business owner that it is the opinion of the business owner that tips are not guaranteed. You are not guaranteed a tip. There's no expectation of a tip. So to say that tips currently are a system that provides the ability to earn more than a minimum wage, you have to make at least $8.25 to even make it to minimum wage, and there's no guarantee of that. So I don't know why we wouldn't want a higher minimum wage underguarding something that's always variable. $6.75 plus X is more than $15 plus X. That's just math. Secondarily, this is already a pretty broken system. She points to, we already have all these servers and bartenders making all this money. The average server or bartender in Massachusetts makes $20.81.
That's not true. That's a tipped employee employee, not a service or bartender.
Fair enough. That is a tipped employee. That's $20.81. It's according to UMass's Perry. That's 33% less than the average worker in the Commonwealth. I wouldn't say that's a great wage for anyone. But more importantly, when you come back down to what's going to happen for the customer, like, I guess you can put a service fee on if you want to. I don't know why you wouldn't just raise the prices, right? Like, as a customer, I'm willing to like absorb that and, you know, pay and even tip on top of that. Whereas if the fee comes, you're right, I'm probably going to tip less. And as a business owner, I don't know anyone who thinks that's a good idea, frankly. But as far as the menu price increase, we're talking about an increase of about 10% over the course of 5 years that pays for this. So like a $12 sandwich becomes $13.20. A $20 entree becomes $22. Like that doesn't seem to me to price anyone out of dining out. Now, you know, according to you, business owners are people who are making sub $70,000 a year, so maybe they're right on that edge, and those are the kind of people who go out to eat all the time. So maybe they're not going to be able to. But I'm willing to make that roll of the dice, I guess.
Okay, so I did just want to clarify his $20.21.
$20.81.
When he says tips employees, that includes massage therapists. It does include gambling workers. It includes barbers, hairdressers, miscellaneous personnel, taxi cab drivers, chauffeurs. Only 28% of the people in that study were even in the hotel and hospitality industry. And of those 28%, only half of them were actually bartenders and servers. This is a very, very subgroup that is affected dramatically by these. All these other people almost all make minimum wage with tips on top. So they're trying to change a very small subset of the industry that is the full service restaurant business in a way that is to eliminate essentially tipping as a function, or at least as part of a function, in a state that doesn't want it. We like the way things work now, and we want it to just stay the same.
I'm so happy you brought up all tipped workers. That, for what it's worth, is one of the things that excites me most about this bill, is moving this forward and being able to attack sub-minimum wage for other tipped employees. It is not true that a lot of these people make minimum wage with tips on top. A lot of these people pay rent and work in an independent contractor model. Some of them that are paid hourly are paid the same hourly, $6.75, that we are as servers and bartenders. I have lots of friends who are hairdressers working under that model today. There are people with disabilities that are being allowed to be paid less than $15 an hour. There are child workers who are allowed to be paid less than $15 an hour. The idea of a sub-minimum wage for any worker is abhorrent. And the first place we should attack there is the place that people see us most frequently and humanize us the most, because sadly we don't look at people with disabilities that way, or children that way,
thank you for
or the immigrant workers who take care of our hair that way. But we do see servers and bartenders that way, and we should take that on as the leaders in that industry.
Yes, it is a tip credit. It's not a sub-minimum wage. It's called a service wage. And so that is a misconception that they push out there. Every single person in Massachusetts is guaranteed $15 an hour. So for them to keep saying that they aren't is not true. They're all
no one's saying you're not guaranteed $15 an hour. I'm saying part of that guarantee is that you get to take $8.25 of that hour if a customer pays it, and redistribute that either to the rest of the staff, or get to keep that as income.
And if this was such a good model, then we would already be making those adjustments.
Which is why 300 restaurants in Massachusetts already have made that adjustment and pay one fair wage, and over 300 restaurants already pay above $6.75.
Those are mostly counter service, fast casual, and quick service restaurants. They are not full service restaurants. So that is why they are not. On your website, you only had one full service restaurant mentioned there, which was called The Keep, which actually spoke out against one fair wage today and said no. That was the only restaurant listed on your site. So anyhow, there were not 300 restaurants, but that's okay. This is not that discussion. This discussion is this good for Massachusetts? That's what this discussion is. Is it good for the servers and bartenders? Is it good for the industry? And we say, no, we don't need it. We don't want it. All the thousands and thousands of endorsers of No on 5 across the state of Massachusetts, including our governor, lieutenant governors, multiple legislators, mayors from both sides of the aisle, and bartenders and servers that are out there on social media.
And city councilors and publications. The Boston Globe is not a small publication. You know, Henry Santana
Elizabeth
of the
Warren
city
and
council.
Ed Markey have not even endorsed it.
All right. So it's clear after 30 plus minutes of discussion where you two stand, and you're not going to change each other's mind.
No,
I'm guessing
we are not.
Now and Tuesday. So let me give you an opportunity to change the mind of those who haven't voted yet and are planning on voting. Your closing statement, again, with the coin flip, Mitch, you get to go last. So the first closing statement, we go to you, Kathi Turner.
Yes, and I probably will not be all of 2 minutes. We are asking for people to vote no on 5 if they care about and want to protect their servers and bartenders across the state that are wearing T-shirts, holding signs, and holding rallies saying protect our tips. Vote no on 5. We are asking people to vote no on 5 if they love their favorite community restaurants, if they want to go to Mario's where Mrs. Mario makes the sauce in the morning and her husband's in the front. Instead of going to Olive Garden, we are asking them to vote no on 5 to protect their community restaurants. We're asking them to vote no on 5 to protect their communities because the small independent restaurants are the backbones of our communities. And as I've said, this ballot question affects this very small subgroup of people, these small, independent, full-service restaurants. And they're saying, please protect us. We love you. We love our teams. We love our communities. Please vote no on 5. We also ask people to vote no on 5 so that they can protect their freedom of choice. If they choose not to go to a restaurant that has tips, they don't have to. As Mitch just said, he says there's over 300 restaurants in Massachusetts that don't use those models. They will start patronizing those if they think. But right now, they have the freedom of choice to make their own decisions. Our bartenders and servers have the freedom of choice to make their own decisions and control their own destinies. We ask you to vote no on 5 if you want to protect how we in Massachusetts choose to live and work and own our own destiny. Don't be fooled by the misinformation of this paid employee of one fair wage that's just dressing a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying to convince people that this would be better for them.
Okay, thank you, Kathi. Mitch, your closing statement.
Well, this has been a pleasure. I will say that much. The Committee to Protect Tips, who is opposing this, cannot point to a single state in the country that tipping has been abolished. They say that One Fair Wage wants to get rid of tipping. As I went over numerous times during this debate, there is no state in the country that has gotten rid of tipping. The worst tipping One Fair Wage state tips 2%. Less than the current state of Massachusetts, and plenty of other One Fair Wage states currently tip as much, if not more. At that same first serving job that I mentioned at the top of my opening statement, a few months in, I filled in one day scooping ice cream, a back of the house role by designation, but I was still able to take tips at the takeout counter. Later that week, I received a paycheck with 3 figures in it for the first time ever. And I approached my boss because I thought there'd been a mistake. I was worried. He informed me that no, there was no mistake. While scooping ice cream, I was being paid a full minimum wage, plus a small increase actually because we got overtime pay for Sundays. And all the while, I was still making pretty good tips. That moment led to 2 things for me. One, the very obvious, I got trained as an ice cream scooper officially and took over those Sunday shifts for myself moving forward. But more importantly, it had me wondering for the rest of my life why the heck I suddenly wasn't worthy of a full minimum wage when I was waiting tables, which in a Friendly's at the time with no booze and an average customer age of 16 years old is a lot of work for not a lot of tips. As you mentioned, they're variable. Kids don't tip a whole lot. Since then, I've bounced around the whole industry. I've worked in sushi bars in Cambridge, college sports bars on Lansdowne Street, October's in Salem, right next door to Kathi, farm-to-table joints in Beverly, craft breweries on the North Shore. The wage has steadily increased, as we've talked about, slowly moving from $2.63 to $3 and some change to $4 and some change, and today it's at $6 and some change. And all the while, that entire time as the wage went up, businesses haven't closed, people haven't stopped tipping, and prices weren't affected enough for you to stop going out to eat. It can sustain a raise to $9.40 next year. It can sustain a raise to $13.60 in 2028, the next time you vote for a president, if this passes. We know how this works. Minnesota, where my wife is from, and I just enjoyed a visit to, implemented this 30 years ago and still tips on average the same as Massachusetts does. Businesses have enjoyed this labor loophole, this ability to redistribute income, long enough, and it's simply time we close it. I deserve a fair wage from my employer, and to keep the tips that the customer leaves me on top of that, not in place of that, as is currently the case. I think it's clear that we can sustain raising that wage incrementally over the next 5 years to the full $15 an hour. UMass Amherst Policy Economy Research Institute estimated this costing 10% as an increase in menu prices. I think it is then obviously the right thing to do. Certainly for servers and bartenders like myself, who could definitely use a raise, as the vast majority of us make less than the average worker in the Commonwealth, but also for customers who are sick of subsidizing the wages of the people who wait on them, and the businesses who are already doing the right thing, the over 300 of them that Kathi mentioned who are already paying a full minimum wage, the hundreds more who are offering awesome and competitive benefits somewhere in between $6.75 and the full $15. So thanks again to all of you for having me, to Ms. Turner for a spirited conversation, information. You can learn more before Election Day over at yeson5ma.com, or you can follow us on social at yeson5ma. Please vote yes for workers, for fairness, and for everyone.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathi Turner, Mitch Gaynes, appreciate you taking the time. Again, you've laid out your positions. Eloquent, passionate. Now the voters will decide in just a few days if they haven't already decided and sent their ballots in. So thank you both for your time, and thank you for watching this Inside Lowell discussion. Hopefully you have learned a little bit more. If you haven't already voted, perhaps today helped make up your mind, or if you've already made up your mind, perhaps it's solidified your vote. Either way, we appreciate you for joining us here. As always, we like to say Inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place. Till next time, everybody, stay safe.